Hello, all of you wayward spirits. My name is Liz Ashley, and I am so obsessed with supernatural that I decided to do some research, Winchester style, on anything and everything mentioned in the show. And though the show has sadly ended, this podcast is going to keep the family together. So, what do you say? Do you want to join me on the hunt? This podcast has a lot of reference to death and disturbing situations, so listener discretion is advised. Hello and welcome to episode 24 of Wayward Spirit Pod. Yes, it is season 3, episode 4, and we are talking about doppelgängers. Yes. Now, if you are on YouTube, you can tell that I changed my layout again of my background. And if you are not listening on YouTube, go check us out on YouTube at Wayward Spirit TV. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notifications. All right. All right. So today we are talking about a couple different episodes. So we are specifically going to talk about Slash Fiction in season 7, episode 6, written by Robbie Thompson and directed by John F. Showalter. And the second episode we are going to talk about is Destiny's Child in season 15, episode 13, written by Eugene Ross Lemming and Brad Buckner. And it was directed by Amin Kadral. I'm sorry, I probably got that wrong. Okay, so let's start with Slash Fiction in season 7. All right. So this episode is when the Leviathan storyline was going on, and there were 2 doppelganger Leviathans that looked just like Sam and Dean that ended up wreaking havoc everywhere. Seriously, I love this episode. I think it is so funny. I think it's great. I love it. All right. So this episode starts out with who we think is Sam and Dean in this bank, but then they end up taking out these like big guns and just start like shooting the place up and robbing the bank. So we have a little inkling that it's not the real Sam and Dean in the beginning. And it's so weird to see them like evil like that. Like I get, we see them evil sometimes, but like it was just so weird. I was like, this is strange. Okay. And then they proceed to put everyone in the bank into the elevator and then shoot them all. Like they shot all of them, every single one. It was wild. And that was the intro. That was the intro. It was crazy. Then we see the real Sam, Dean, and Bobby, and they are torturing a Leviathan as we speak. And and the Leviathan's like, look, I'm the least of your worries. I'm guessing you haven't seen the news this morning. And they're like, what? So then they go and they watch the news and they see themselves on camera. And the news anchor's like, Sam and Dean Winchester are on the run or whatever. It was so funny. Like, I just find this so funny because everyone thinks it's them. I just think it's hilarious. So Sam and Dean go to kill them, and Bobby is like yelling at them because he's like, you guys are stupid. You don't even know how to kill them yet. So, like, this was like in this episode, they realized Borax kills it, but they didn't, or Borax like hurts it or whatever, but they didn't realize that they didn't know that before Sam and Dean went after them. And so Bobby's like yelling at them, like, what are you doing? Like, we don't know how to kill them. Like, what are you doing? But they go anyway, of course. And when they're on the road, like it's so funny because they stop at a gas station and Sam, he's just being all sweet. And he's just like, do you have protein bars? And da 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 da. And then the guy looks at him and starts to call the police because like he recognizes him, and Sam's like, oh crap. And then he's like, we gotta go, we gotta leave. Like he thinks we're them. And I always thought this was so funny because I know there are so many memes that are like, I wonder like what Sam's friends thought like when they saw this, because you know they probably saw this because we talked about this in the Amazon episode where the girl was like, apparently they were serial killers. We talked about that on the Amazon episode, and I just think it's so funny because like the people from Stanford are probably like, what is going on? Like they were thought to be dead, and then they were serial killers, and then nothing really happens after that. They kind of just, I think they just kind of are like, oh yeah, they were serial killers. But I think it's so funny. I love those memes. I wonder what his friends at Stanford thought. Like, they're probably like, what is going on? What did this kid get into? Oh man. But Sam and Dean actually go to see Frank for the very first time to get new IDs in a different car because the Leviathans are literally using like a replica of Baby. And Dina's not happy about it. And he even says when they're in the car, he's like, nobody puts Baby in a corner. Which is a perfect line. Perfect line. I love it. But oh my gosh, in this next scene, I totally forgot happened. It was so funny, but like they're in the car and they're driving, and then Dean starts like lip singing this song, I'm all out of love. I'm so lost without you. He's like lip singing it, right? And Sam just looks over and is like, what? Like he doesn't even say anything. He just looks over, and Dean's face, like he like immediately stops, right? But then he smiles, and it's so cute. It's so cute. And then he starts lip singing again. But he eventually turns off the radio and acted like it never happened, which is really funny. But Sam then realizes that the Leviathans are basically going on like a killing spree road trip, and they're stopping at all the places that they did, like they started jobs on together in order. So basically like season 1 in order. That's where the Leviathans are going. And the funny thing is the next place they're going to is St. Louis, which, if you listen to this podcast or watch it or whatever, you know that St. Louis is my hometown. So I love that they go to St. Louis. But I think it's also funny because in that episode, that's when they first encountered like a shapeshifter. And so I think it's kind of ironic that like they're literally hunting down their doppelgangers in a place where someone shapeshifted into Dean. I just think that's funny. But then we see my favorite scene in this whole entire episode. It's so funny. The Leviathan, Sam and Dean are at Dean's favorite diner, and they are talking about the real Sam and Dean. And Leviathan Dean is like, he thinks the burgers are disgusting. And then Leviathan Sam calls his salad, I just think this is so funny, dead plants with creamy goo on top. I just thought that was so funny. And then he was like, it's like eating self-righteousness. Oh my gosh, they're so funny. Like I love Leviathan them. I just think they're hilarious, and I like the different versions of them. I think they're great, as we'll see as we go along. So then Leviathan Sam proceeds to say there is nothing but Satan vision inside. How he's walking around in a jacket with detachable arms is beyond me. He literally says that. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is so much funnier than I remember. Like, I haven't rewatched this episode in so long. And I was like, I mean, they're hilarious. Like, Leviathan, Sam, and Dean are so funny. And then and then he says, and then this is like the classic line, the classic dialogue, and it's just the best. And he's like, Sam's like, I had a brother with this many issues once, and you know what I did? I ate him. And Dean Leviathan is like, of course you did. I just love that part. And I know, it's in memes everywhere, but I just think it's so funny because he's like, of course you did. Like, of course, that's what you do. Oh man, I love this episode. But then after they have their little discussion, they proceed to rob the diner and get one of these kids to film it. They literally make this kid film them, like robbing the diner and killing everyone. It's wild. So when the police actually watch that video that the kid took, the Sam Leviathan is yelling at him to keep recording, and he says he wants the whole world to know what Sam and Dean Winchester are capable of. Oh, and like I said, it's so weird. Like, I know, there's like Lucifer Sam and Soulless Sam, but every time I see Sam like rude and mean, I'm always like, but no, like evil Sam. I'm like, but no, you're not evil, Sam. No. So it's just weird to me. So that whole scene with him saying that, I was just like, but no, Sam. But like I said, they proceed to kill everyone, even the guy filming, and then they smile and say good night, St. Louis, and that they are going to Iowa next. But Sam and Dean actually get to St. Louis, and when they get there, they see the Leviathan them rolling by in a replica of Baby. But right as they see them rolling by, the police actually spot the real them and come pick the real them up. And they're like, look, you're making a mistake. You're making a mistake. But the police are like, dude, like, no, we're not. No, we're not. And and the Leviathan Dean literally like smiles and winks at them. It's so creepy. It's so creepy. Like beyond creepy. So, of course, they lock them up and, well, they're at like the police station. So they lock them up in the police station. And Dean keeps telling the police that they're making a mistake. But of course, the police officer at first does not believe them. And like, okay, you're crazy, dude. But he lets him call Bobby. He's like, can I just have my one phone call? And this is another one of my favorite scenes. I just think it's so funny because Dean calls Bobby and like talks to him like completely normal, like so nonchalantly. And Bobby's like, yeah, you're gonna have to cut its head off, but keep the head away from the body, because if not, it'll come back. And then don't forget to put the borax on. It's so funny because the police officer is looking at him like, what are you talking about? Like, what is happening? So of course he hangs up the phone and is like, no, like no more of this, no. But as the police officer turns the corner, he actually sees, so two of the policemen were Leviathans. And so he actually sees them like eating one of the other police officers, and then goes back to Dean, is like, okay, I believe you. Like, I don't know what I just saw, but okay. And so he lets Dean out. And then we see Sam in like the interrogation room, and Dean comes in, but it's the Leviathan Dean. And I just think this part is so funny because he walks in and he's like, you're not Dean. And he's like, I'm Dean adjacent. I don't know why I think that's so funny, but he's like, I'm Dean adjacent. Like, I'm kind of Dean. And then my other favorite part is when Dean sees Sam and he's like, Sammy. And then he looks again, he's like, not Sammy. I just think that's so cute because like they know it's not each other and like they can pick up on like the little cues because you know they're brothers and they're cute. They're so cute. But Dean ends up killing both of them and saves the day. Kind of. They live, but the Leviathans eventually end up killing the police station people anyway. So, you know, they save the day for like a few hours. But yeah, that's what happened. All right, so now let's talk about Destiny's Child in season 15. So, this is the first time that we are talking about season 15, and I'm really excited because I actually really love this episode. But if you have not seen season 15 or this episode, fast forward just a few minutes, just in case you don't want any spoilers. I'm not going to say any huge spoilers, but I am going to talk about the doppelganger part of the episode. So, you know, if you haven't seen it, you can skip ahead. All right. So, this episode is when we see the snooty alternate doppelganger version of Sam and Dean, and they are just so freaking funny. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. So, this episode starts out with Sam and Dean trying to figure out how to stop Chuck from destroying all of the different universes and worlds when they hear this strange noise. And when they go to check it out, they see them in a Fiat. They're like totally dressed differently, no flannels, like all fancy. And they're in a Fiat. It's wonderful. But it's so freaking funny. And Sam and Dean are just like dumbfounded. They're like, what is happening right now? And then they just look at each other and they're like, Sam, Dean, Sam, like, what is happening? And just as quick as they appeared, they disappeared. Like in an instant, they just like disappeared. They just like went away. So they go to tell Cass what just happened, but Cass is like, I do not understand. Like, I have no clue what you're talking about. And Dean's like, yeah, me either. And he's like, in their car. He was like, did you see their car? Dean was not happy about the Fiat. And so Sam says, it's like they were us, but from another world. And then that's when Billy comes in and was like, yeah, because God is destroying it, which I think they already knew, but I guess they didn't know like they were destroying that particular world. I don't know. Because I saw the like recap in the beginning and she was telling them that he was, you know, getting rid of all the worlds. So I assume that they knew, but okay, whatever. Also, side note, this has nothing to do with doppelgangers or the alternate universe versions of them. But Danielle and Jen are in this episode, and I totally forgot that they were. I totally forgot that that was this episode. This episode is like jam packed with stuff, and I did not realize that. Like, I think season 15, they really just jam packed those episodes for the most part. For the most part, okay. Putting a disclaimer on that one. All right. All right. So after Sam and Dean get back from talking with Sister Joe, Cass shows them that the two doppelganger alternate universe thems were actually like when they went back into the rift or whatever, they got stuck in between the dimensions. So they got stuck between their dimension and Sam and Dean's dimension, and they were like halfway there, but they couldn't hear or see them or anything. They were just kind of like, it's almost like they looked like they were like ghosts, but they were like stuck. And so Dean's like, well, are they hurt? Like, is anything wrong with them? And Cass is like, no, I don't think so. And he's like, okay, and then just leaves. He's like, well, you know, as long as they're not hurt, okay, bye. Got more important stuff to do. It was so funny. So Cass goes to the empty, and then Sam and Dean go to hell. And when they get back, they realize that God is watching them. And so Dean's like, well, if God is watching us and we need to figure out how to kill God, then he's like, I have an idea. And so they go to where like the doppelganger alternate universe them is, and they get them out of the, in between the dimensions. And this scene is one of my most favorite scenes ever, like ever. Like I'm even saying in like the whole series, I'll say it, I will, because this is a great scene. And every time I watch it, I just laugh so hard because I just think it's so funny because they're essentially like making fun of like of like everything Sam and Dean had to go through. And I know that's bad, but it's just so funny. Okay, we're gonna talk about it. Okay. So they all sit down, and then the normal Sam and Dean start talking to them, just like kind of tell them what's going on. And the alternate universe them is so funny because they're like so prissy and like kind of snooty and just like the complete opposite of anything that Sam and Dean are. And and they were like, hunting the family business. Only for them it was actually a business. And and Dean's like yeah, we don't drink this much. And he was talking about the beer. And Sam's like, yeah, Dad won't keep it in the house. Which is really funny because in their universe, John was like an alcoholic, but in the other universe, they didn't even keep beer in the house. Okay. And it's so funny because the alternate universe Dean's voice is so high pitched. He like really took it up at like an octave, because Dean's voice is so like it's so low and kind of almost like a growl. And and the alternate universe Dean's voice is like really high pitched, and I just think it's pretty hilarious. But and Sam's voice is so funny. Like the alternate universe Sam is so funny because I feel like he talks like an old rich man. He talks like a, oh, well, that happened, and then that happened, and oh my goodness. Like I think that's how he talks. It's so funny. Oh my gosh. Okay. And but then they like proceed to talk about their dad, and they're like, yeah, Dad spoils us. They're like too dad, and it's really funny because Sam and Dean are looking at each other like, what the hell? Like Dad spoils them, like to Dad, the best guy ever. What? like like what? Like sorry, but John Winchester was not the best guy ever, not in their universe. And I don't like his character, but I do love Jeffrey Dean Morgan, and I love their relationship, and I love that Danielle and Jensen set up Hillary Burton and Jeffrey Dean Morgan because I just think they're so cute. And yeah, but I digress. He was like the worst father ever. So like so for them, so that's why I think it's so funny because they're like literally making fun of the fact that Sam and Dean had this horrible life, and yet there was a Sam and Dean out there that had like the best life imaginable. It's quite funny. So and so the doppelganger, like Sam and Dean are like, yeah, so you live here, right? And like you do your operation here, right? And they were like, yeah, we work all over the country. And then Dean's like, the alternate universe Dean is like, exhausting, right? We work all over the world. We have to have 2 sets of pilots on standby. And Sam's like, pilots? In a plane. And so the alternate universe Sam was like, oh, you don't have planes? Oh dear. Oh dear. How do you manage? you manage? And the real Sam is like, how do you get paid? And that's when they explain to them that like their dad built up Hunter Corp and that's how they get paid. And the alternate universe dean's like, you don't get paid? And they're like, yeah, no. Like, no one pays us for this. What are you talking about? I think that part is the funniest to me because this whole time they have to like figure out a way to get money and like, stay in these crappy motels, even though most times they didn't look that crappy. They looked pretty darn nice. And, set design, but, squatting in old houses, stuff like that. And these other guys were like literally taking planes everywhere. Like, that's so funny to me. So then they're like I think Dean's over with it at this point, and they're just like, okay, like, God is after us. Like, he checks in on us sometimes, and we need to kill God because he's the one destroying the universes. So you need to sit in for us so we can go do that. And and they're like, God checks in on you, and they're like, yeah, we have a relationship. I love Chuck. We all know I do. I love him so much. All right. But they're like, first, Sam looks at the alternate universe Sam and is like, man, you gotta lose the man bun. You gotta lose the man bun. And I have to think that is like a callback to the convention when Jen put Jared's head in a man bun and and Jensen was just like, yeah, no. So I gotta say, I think that's a callback. But then Dean looks at alternate universe him and is like, dude, like, you gotta, like, he has both of his collars popped. And he's like, you can't, not the collars. Like, you gotta put him down. And they're like so distraught. They're like, what? It's so funny. So they end up leaving the doppelgangers at home, and we see them talking, and they're now in like different clothes. They're in Sam and Dean's clothes, and this part is just so funny because their voices are just so funny. And he calls him Samuel. He was like, Samuel, they said lose the man bun. And he's like, these hillbilly clothes are bad enough. I have to draw the line somewhere. And my hair is sacred. I also love that they put that line in because I feel like they were making fun of like Sam's hair for the whole, like, throughout the years, because everyone was like, it's sacred. Oh no, he can't lose his hair. And then when Jared cut his hair for Walker, everyone was like, what? And so I think it's really funny. They're like, no, the hair is sacred. Oh man. And I also think it's really funny that when Sam drinks his beer, he puts like his pinky out. Oh, it's hilarious. But as they're sitting there trying to be authentic, the alternative universe Dean finds the real Dean's porn on his computer. And the alternate universe Sam is like, oh, if Dad would ever find us with that, he would take away our trust funds. Oh my gosh, it's so great. Literally so great. And Doppelganger Dean's like, look, Sammy. He finally says, Sammy, he's like, I gotta tell you, they might be simple, but I mean, they have their own place. He's like, all they do is drink beer, hunt monsters, and watch porn. That is what he says. Oh my gosh. And then, like, right as he says that, of course, they cut to like Dean, Sam, Jack, and Cass all like struggling, and I think they're in hell, all like struggling in hell. Oh, it's wild. wild. But at the end of everything, they come back and Dean is like telling them bye. He's like, okay, bye, like see you never, kind of. And the Dean doppelganger's like, we could just all live here. And Dean's like, no, 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 no. And then the doppelganger Sam says, like a club. And Dean's like, yeah, no, you need to leave. And they're like, oh, by the way, we saw it. And he's like, you saw what? And they were like, the car. And they're like, and he's like, did you touch it? And they're like, we drove it. And Dean loses his mind and they're like, okay, we're gonna leave. And he's like, yeah. Literal funny. I love this episode. I think it's one of the funniest. I think that's one of the funniest storylines ever. I just love it. I love this episode. It's great. It's amazing. All right. So Supernatural doesn't really talk about doppelgangers explicitly. They don't ever really call them doppelgangers, except for in the shapeshifter episode where they went to St. Louis, the original one. Dean did call the shapeshifter like a doppelganger, but it wasn't really a doppelganger. And so, but that's the only time that they say doppelganger. So they don't ever really talk about the lore or anything like that on doppelgangers. But bad things do tend to happen. Like when the Leviathan doppelgangers were around, they killed everybody. Bad things happened. And then I don't know about the alternate universe ones, but I think Dean would argue that them driving baby while being around would be evil and a bad thing happening. So, kind of goes with the real lore. Which we are going to talk about. So the lore on doppelgangers is honestly really fascinating. We talked about doppelgangers in last week's episode with Real Scary Pod. So if you want to check that out, go watch or listen to episode 23, where we talk about haunted dolls for the most part, but we also talk about a real life story of a doppelganger in Canada, which is really interesting. So go check that out. I'll probably put it, if you're watching this on YouTube, at the end of the screen. But yeah, if you're listening on Spotify, go check episode 23 out if you haven't yet. It's a great episode with Real Scary Pod. But anyway, now we're going to dive deep into this lore, and the lore is actually super interesting. So let's get to it. All right. So first, let's start out with the definition of doppelgangers. So the definition of doppelgangers, it actually means double walker. And it is a biologically unrelated look-alike or a double of a living person. So if you've ever seen How I Met Your Mother, they have that whole thing where they like find each other's doppelgangers and stuff like that. But in ancient Egyptian mythology, a ka is what they were called, and it was a tangible spirit double having the same memories and feelings as the person to whom the counterpart belongs. It's not similar to the doppelgangers in Supernatural because of course they were just like different versions of Sam and Dean. They didn't really have the same memories as Sam and Dean. But in German, the doppelganger translates to double goer. And in the German folklore, they believed that these doubles were either a wraith or an appropriation of the living person. And that's how so it wasn't a ghost, but they were like distinguishing it from a ghost, because in German folklore, like it's not a ghost. It's either like a wraith. It's like an actual physical person. But it just happened. It is also supernatural. But the concept of the existence of a spirit double is actually an ancient widespread belief. And it is believed that if you meet your double, it is a sign that your death is coming, which is wild. Okay. But in traditional folklore, doppelgangers are thought to be ghostly apparitions or entities other than spiritual beings, which goes along with the Egyptian folklore, not the German folklore. And in this folklore, in the traditional folklore, they are almost always evil. So the sight of one is widely considered to actually be a bad omen, and doppelgangers are supposedly harbingers of darkness and bad luck. So, like I was saying earlier with supernatural, like bad things happened when they came around, and that goes with the Lord because they are a bad omen and they bring bad luck. So that's what doppelgangers mean, or seeing your doppelganger means. So Norse folklore actually regards doppelgangers as Vardoger, which are ghostly beings that take the places of a living person conducting various activities and actions in advance. So Norse mythology or folklore is a little bit different than all the other ones. Basically, they're not like a bad omen, but they basically carry out the actions of the person before, or after, well, essentially before, they make these activities in advance, which if you listen to episode 23, you would know that that's what the doppelganger in Canada did. So get this. According to legend, doppelgangers can be seen performing an action before the person makes them, or the doppelgangers can be seen repeating the same movements over and over, like the story from the last episode in the Norse mythology version. But they can also be seen in the mirror next to your own reflection, which is exactly what happened to Abraham Lincoln before he died. So Abraham Lincoln claimed that he saw another reflection of himself in the mirror, but the other reflection that he saw was paler and skinnier and just looked like really sick. And when he mentioned this to his wife, she literally said that this is a bad omen, and like she didn't think he was going to survive to see his second term as president. And as we all know what happened next, I would say she's right, because Abraham Lincoln did not live to see his second term, and he died, I think, shortly after that. So, just saying, it probably was a bad omen. All right. Another story of a real life doppelganger is in the case of Emily Sage. Only she wasn't the only one who saw it. So she actually never saw her doppelganger, but everybody else around her did. So I guess she doesn't die. And I'm surmising why she didn't die, because she didn't see her doppelganger, but everybody else around her did. So she was a teacher in Latva. I think that, I'm not sure, I'm sorry if I butchered it, in the mid 1800s. And apparently she held 18 different teaching positions in just 16 years. So unless she was like super busy and moved around a lot, like doing the math, that's kind of impossible. But not if you have a double. It's not impossible. So her current students in the last place that she taught began to see like two sets of her while she was teaching. So she would be writing on the blackboard and her double would be like mimicking it beforehand, like the Norse mythology, like what we were talking about. So her double was like acting out the action beforehand, and there were like two people teaching the class. Like, what would you do? Like, that would be wild. I don't know what I would do. I'd be like, where's the salt? Not that I don't know if salt can get doppelgangers, but just saying. So she was actually let go because of her double. Though she never saw it, it creeped everybody else out, so they let her go. Like, can you imagine being fired from a job and they tell you like, well, we see your double and she's creepy, and you're like, my what? Like, you see my what? What are you talking about? Wouldn't that be wild? I just think that would be wild. All right. But this is like really similar, like I said, to the Norse mythology, because I don't think her doppelganger was like evil. I mean, she did get fired, but like she didn't die, and it's probably because she didn't see it. But it wasn't evil. It was just like mimicking her actions. So Catherine the Great was actually another real life story about a doppelganger sighting. And she was the Empress of Russia throughout the 18th century. And she was also the longest ruling female leader in the country's history. And where was it? Let's see, Russia. In Russia. I love that. Anybody watch? Sorry, that reminds me of Anastasia. Anybody ever watch Anastasia? That was my favorite princess movie growing up. Was not a Disney princess movie, but it was my favorite princess movie growing up. Anyway, anyway, so that was a cool little tidbit. She was the longest running female ruler in Russia. Really cool. All right, but before her death in 1796, Catherine's servants like woke her up pretty frantically because they said that they saw her sitting in her throne at night, like just silently, but they knew she was asleep. So they were like, whoa, wake up. So Catherine went downstairs and saw her double sitting on the throne and told her like servants to shoot the doppelganger. So I guess they did, but like I want to know what happened to the doppelganger. Like, did it die? Like, was it flesh and bone, or was it like was it like a ghost? I couldn't find that part, but I'm curious to know what happened. Um, but just a week later, Catherine died suddenly of a stroke. So that doppelganger was evil and was a bad omen, and she did die after seeing it. So that doppelganger fits the traditional lore of doppelgangers. All right. So there, like, this would not be a proper doppelganger episode if I did not mention the Vampire Diaries. So I still haven't finished the series, but I do love the Vampire Diaries. And if you have watched the Vampire Diaries, you know it is filled with doppelgangers. So let's talk about the lore and TVD real quick. All right. So there are two doppelganger lines in TVD, which come from Silas and Amara. So Amara actually has the most doppelgangers, being Elena, Catherine Pierce, who I love. I love Catherine, and Tatia. And then Silas has two that we know of, Stefan and Tom. So in TVD in the Vampire Diaries, doppelgangers are more of a species, not they're like a supernatural species. I don't know if they're essentially bad omens. I mean, I guess they kind of are, because when Catherine comes, she brings a whole lot of bad luck. And when Silas comes, he also brings a whole lot of bad luck. So I'm not really sure. I don't know, but I mean they're there like throughout the whole series. But yeah, I just think that's funny. But anyway, they're not like ghosts, or they don't just like disappear. Like they're there. They can die though. But in the Vampire Diaries, doppelgangers are also known as shadow selves or mortal shadow selves. And they are a supernatural occurrence that was created by Hecate. I think. Sorry, I should know how to say that, but I don't. The witch queen, and she so basically what she did is she put a spell, because this was in order to restore the balance of nature as a result of Silas and Amara becoming immortals. So Silas and Amara became immortals, and because they never died, and it was like messing up the natural order of things, she put these body doubles of the immortals so that they would die in place of Silas and Amara, because Silas and Amara were immortal. So they would die in place of them, and it would restore the natural balance, which Well, I was watching The Vampire Diaries. I think I kind of missed that. I mean, maybe I didn't, but I think I did. I think I kind of missed that part of it, and I just think that the way they set that up was so interesting. And I really like that that was like the lore that they came up with or used or whatever. I thought that was really cool. All right. So, like I said, Supernatural doesn't really talk about the doppelganger lore all that much. So, the only similarity I would say is that that they look alike, and that they're other versions of themselves, and that in most cases they do bring bad luck and like a bad omen or bad things almost. Although Sam and Dean did see them and they did not die, that's a difference. And they don't have the same memories, that's a difference. And what else? Yeah. And they don't ever really talk about doppelgangers or anything like that. But I just really wanted to talk about doppelgangers and the doppelganger lore because I just think it's so interesting. So I wanted to relate it to these episodes also because these episodes are just so freaking hilarious and like two of my favorites. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. But thank you so much to all of my fellow wayward spirits for joining me on this journey today. And if you want to go on more hunts with me, make sure to subscribe and follow Wayward Spirit Pod wherever you listen to podcasts. And subscribe if you're watching this on YouTube and turn on post notifications so you don't miss next week where we are hunting Jen. I don't know how to say it. I always feel like it's weird when I say it. Jen. Okay, anyway. So next week's gonna be so fun. But if you're already wanting some more content and some more Wayward Spirit Pod, check us out on Patreon at Wayward Spirit, where there are bloopers, behind the scenes moments, the visual episodes to season 1 and 2, all sorts of fun stuff. And I would love to put together some listener stories. So if you want to tell me what you think about doppelgangers, if you've ever saw a doppelganger or any supernatural experience or story of your own, send me an audio file, a video file, a text file, whatever you are comfortable with, to waywardspiritpod@gmail.com, and I would love to get those on the podcast. So please send those in. Also, if you want even more Wayward Spirit Pod, check us out on Instagram at Wayward Spirit Pod, on Instagram for Wayward Spirit TV at Wayward Spirit TV, and on YouTube at Wayward Spirit TV. And what else? Oh, we have a TikTok at Wayward Spirit Pod. Yeah, check us out. That was a little discombobulated. Sorry about that. But anyway, I will see all of you Wayward Spirits next week. And don't forget to stay spooky. Bye.